advice, just focus on people. It's all about people.
Remember, as entrepreneurs, you never get to turn off. You can never stop talking about what you're doing.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. And hello to all of those that are tuning in from online and from our webcast centers across the province. Our moderator tonight, David Bowden, is a graduate from the University of Toronto as an industrial engineer and has an international MBA from the Rotman School of Management. In addition to holding an impressive list of executive roles at Sprint Canada, Direct Energy, Sears, and the list goes on, he's also the founding president of Empori.com and a certified off-road motorcycle instructor. He's comfortable working in both Spanish and Italian, and together with his wife, Anne, and 2 children, has traveled and worked in more than 60 countries across the world. He's an active community volunteer and was board chair of Habitat for Humanity Canada for the past 2 years. He is a governor of the University of Toronto, as well as a volunteer advisor with the Mars Cleantech sector, and is also a director of the Bata Museum. So I would like to welcome David up here tonight. Thank you for joining us to moderate this panel, and he will be introducing our entrepreneurs as well.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight, and I can promise you're going to hear some interesting stories from people that have lived and done a lot of the things that many of you are going to be confronting now if you haven't already. So as they talk a little bit about their business, jot down any notes because we really want to get to the interactive part where you can come forward and each of you speak about your business. I'm going to let each of the folks introduce themselves after I just announce them and bring them up on stage and tell you a little bit about their business. So we'll go through that, and then we'll get into some specific challenges of what they've faced as entrepreneurs. So first up, I'd like to ask if Ahmed could come up and join me on stage. Ahmed is running a company called WatrHub, which he'll do a little more. Come on up. And Michael Helander, who is president and CEO of OTI Lumionics, a very innovative LED technology that they have, and he will tell you more about. And Will Rogers, who is partner and vice president at Galt Green Energy. Hey, Will. So with that, we'll just move across the stage. So Ahmed, if you want to tell us, first of all, about WatrHub and give us a minute on yourself as well, or how that fits with how WatrHub developed. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, David. And great to be here. So WatrHub is a data mining and analytics company. What we do is we match really interesting water technologies with cities whose water infrastructure needs them to ultimately drive better outcomes for water resources. So, the press dubs us as the Bloomberg for water. So that's one helpful way to think about what we do. And a bit of a background myself. I'm an electrical engineering graduate from University of Toronto. Spent a number of years working at Microsoft in a development lead role before starting WatrHub.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Go ahead, Michael.
So I say a bit about my background first. I was at U of T for nearly 10 years, undergraduate in engineering science, ended up doing a PhD in material science engineering, postdoc in chemical engineering, working on a new field called organic electronics. So it's the idea of building electronic devices using carbon-based dyes and pigments that are almost identical to what goes into making clothing, bright colors, printer ink, toner, etc. And so during that time, we were focused on how to make devices that could generate light, so organic LEDs, and ways of doing it better, and focusing on new materials and new processing techniques. Attracted the interest of large display manufacturers, and they were just starting to emerge for use in cell phones and large area TVs, and then on the horizon looking at using this technology for lighting. And so they were interested in kind of adopting the technology we're working on, which actually meant they wanted to acquire it from the university for very cheap. So naturally we started a company and said, okay, let's go through these negotiations, and ended up accidentally along the way saying, well, let's not actually sell it, let's try to build a company out of this. And so what we're doing at the moment is developing a lower cost, scalable method of essentially printing sheets of light. So you can imagine, large rolls of plastic, essentially just like wallpaper, that can emit light, all based on sustainable carbon-based dyes and pigments.
Thanks, Michael. Will?
Apparently I'm the artsy one on the panel here because I went to Wilfrid Laurier and have a Bachelor of Arts degree. And I was there and I moved into the retail world for a little while and gained some experience there with a large Canadian company, helping them open new stores, marketing and business development. From there I went into the financial world, believe it or not. You wouldn't think that's a transition you'd make, but that's what happens because business development is business development. I've been doing that now for about 14 years. In 2012, I was asked to become a part of the team at Galt Green Energy. Galt Green Energy is a company that developed a fully packaged, environmentally friendly, low-impact hydropower turbine. We're currently, and have been since 2012, marketing our product internationally, and we've had a very interesting experience doing that. So I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about that this evening and answering some of the questions you may have.
Okay, thanks very much. I find when I'm usually attending in the audience on these, I'm remembering the businesses more than the names. So let me just recap what you just heard. Ahmed is in the data mining business and has mountains of data about water usage and consumption and that sort of thing, which is hugely sought after by a lot of people that want to sell to those people that are working in those industries. Michael is illuminating things. It's fantastic to see the stuff on their website with big flexible sheets of lighting material. It's probably third or fourth generation LED type of work, which is great. And Will's company, which I've done some advising to them on through Mars, has a hydro generation system that you just, instead of building dams and sluiceways and everything, you put a prepackaged unit in and it actually siphons the water through, and it's very low impact, very quick to market to go in place, and very suitable to small drops, small volumes of water in a decentralized form, and it's very low impact that way. So you've got water, light, and hydro generation sitting across from me. Thank you for indulging me in that little recap. So maybe with all of the startups and ventures that go on, it's a fairly similar set of issues that frequently comes up, but they manifest themselves differently for every business. And what I'd like to do is maybe just have each of the guys describe a little bit what were some of the unexpected challenges that they faced in growing their business. Because you start with an idea of your head and then you write it down, and that's your business plan, or this is how it'll roll out, and then reality sets in. So I'll just go across and ask them to describe a little bit about those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, part of the whole journey is how unexpected it is. You know, to back up a little bit in terms of, you know, how the idea came, then some of the challenges. You know, started the company over 3 years ago with a really close friend, Sunit. And at the time, you know, we were two software guys working at Microsoft and Seattle, Silicon Valley. So, you know, we'd seen how software's just transformed the way we live, the way we work. I mean, the way we travel. Think of Airbnb. Think of how we consume videos with Netflix. Now you don't have to go to a video store anymore. And we started thinking about how some of the biggest challenges for the next 100+ years is around how the world uses natural resources. And you know, in our minds, you know, the kinds of innovation that's possible with software hasn't really made a meaningful impact in how the world uses natural resources. So we decided that we were gonna take our software skill sets and apply to this world, and we decided we're just gonna quit our jobs and move back to Toronto and start figuring it out. And so at the time we didn't know exactly what we were doing, but it was just that sort of idea and that driving passion. And you know, the idea for WatrHub came as we started meeting more people. So we started meeting with all these business leaders in the water industry, and they really opened our eyes to how big the challenge water is, and you know, how water infrastructure is crumbling around North America, how water quality issues, water scarcity issues, and yet, you know, they described how difficult it was for them to access information, to make better decisions around how we manage our water resources. And to us, this was shocking and surprising. And you know, the goal with WatrHub was to solve that problem. So on a 500,000 foot view, that's what the idea was. But you know, the challenge really comes when you start taking that down to what are specific customer pain points, what does the market need, how do you deliver a great product? And that's where a lot of our unexpected challenges came. I mean, I can talk about, we knew nothing about water when we started over 3 years ago. So, we started hearing feedback from all these different people that they needed better information. And so our first idea was, let's build a news tracker, because everyone was talking about how difficult it is to track what's going on in water. And so hey, maybe there's a simple app we can build, a news tracker. And we spend 6 months and some investor money in building it, and talking to all these people along the way and hearing all this feedback. And when we finally launched, we only had 2 lukewarm users out of all the people that we talked to. And so that was a big learning experience, but it helped us realize that we can't be all things to all people, and that's what the approach that we were trying to take early on. And so it really helped us become more disciplined in terms of understanding specific customers, what challenges they have, and how we can address it.
Thanks, Ahmed. An interesting point that you don't have to be an expert in the area that your business is going to run in, as we see. Go ahead, Michael.
So for us, I mean, we really got started 4 years ago, incorporated 3 years ago. Everything we've done has really been in the last 12 months. So the kind of ironic part is we've done a lot. Built a team from 3 guys in basically a university basement lab. We're 14 now. We have 3,500 square feet, actually directly across the street from here, of pilot production offices. We have big corporate customers. We're setting up scaled production, lots of things. The ironic bit is that, in our 4-year history, it took us 3 years to win over initial supporters and 1 year to actually accomplish what we were telling people we were trying to do in that 4-year period. And I mean, part of the challenge is that, first we thought, okay, it's because we're inexperienced. We were 3 PhD graduates, no business background, and people would say, well, you have no experience in business. How are you going to commercialize this? And we said, okay, that's a barrier. Went around trying to figure that out, trying to bring on, surround ourselves with advisors and mentors who had done this before, to be able to kind of guide us and say, hey, look, yes, we don't know what we're doing, but we have people around us that do. And kind of through that process, we realized, well, wait a minute, most startups and new ventures are often started by people that have no entrepreneurial experience and have never done it before. So that really shouldn't be a barrier. It's like telling first-time parents you shouldn't have kids because you've never had kids before. It's a little bit ridiculous. The next kind of barrier we came up with was, okay, well, you guys are doing hard technology, manufacturing, hard science and engineering, wanting to build stuff. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of money to try to scale and be successful. And so that was a barrier. And actually, I was just looking up the stats yesterday, and based on venture-backed companies in North America, the stats are average company takes more than 7 years to reach success, more than $40 million on average. And some of the biggest successes have taken hundreds of millions, if not up to $1 billion in capital raise. So that's not really a true barrier for starting a company. And we ended up realizing was, people don't, at the end of the day, understand very deep engineering, hard science, hard technology. And it's not their fault, because often it takes years of domain expertise, and then it's figuring out a way. I was working in this for 5 or 6 years, and my experience just scratches the surface. Is finding a way, how do you give people a 50,000-foot view where anyone can understand what you're doing, but still have kind of layers of an onion where you can peel it back and say, well, here's what the actual hairy, complex reality actually looks like. And you want to go one step deeper? Okay, I'm happy to dig all the way down into the nitty-gritty details, but if I show you that first, your eyes are going to glaze over and have no clue what I'm talking about. And so it really took us the first 3 years, I would say, to kind of figure all of that out, figure out our own messaging, have kind of confidence in ourselves. I mean, we were telling people we want to do advanced manufacturing of next generation light sources, and we want to do it in Canada, in Ontario, and people are like, are you crazy? We build cars here, we chop down trees, we pump oil out of the ground, and that's really all we do in Canada in terms of most of the economy and manufacturing. And it actually wasn't until through a local accelerator here at Rotman that we met a guy called Lee Lau, who graduated from U of T back in the 1980s, couldn't get a job. So what do you do in those days? You start a company. He started a little company called ATI Technologies out in Markham that was making graphics chips and graphics cards. And over 20 years, built that into a $5.5 billion company, acquired and merged with AMD back in the mid-2000s, $5.5 billion, did very well. He basically started that from nothing and built it up. And they were doing advanced manufacturing and advanced, state-of-the-art technology from Canada, from Ontario, from the GTA. And it was really finding that initial supporter that was saying, hey, we've done it before. I believe in you guys, and it can be done, that gave us the kind of catalyst to pull everything together after kind of running in spirals for the first 3 years.
Good summary. I saw a lot of nodding heads around the room. Will?
Barriers. I wish I could say we didn't have any, but unfortunately we've had a few. Galt Green in itself is an interesting company because we were once known as Rapido Technologies, so we sort of fall in the gray area between an established company and a startup. We were initially established in 1980. The reason I tell you that is because from 1980 until 2012, it was a successful business. From 2012 to 2015, it was a difficult business. From 1980 to 2012, the hydropower world was a little different than it is today, specifically here in Ontario. So the playing field for new types of hydropower technology, it wasn't really evolving. They were using technologies that had existed for the last 100 years. There were some refinements that were being made. Our current president and founder established a patented casing for our water turbine in 1980. Started using that. The market loved it. It was an easy way to implement here in Ontario. It was efficient. It was cost effective. It was a really great product. And it made him a lot of money. So in 2012, after refining and constantly working on the development of this casing since 1980, because R&D happens all the way through the process of the business, he decided to look at the low head market. What that means is there are drops for waterfalls between 2 and 6 meters high. Not a lot of people were looking at them. The reason, there wasn't a type of technology in the market that was viable for 2 to 6 meters of drop. It wasn't, giving a huge return on an investment, and companies just weren't dedicating any money to developing these low head types of technologies. So in 2012, we started looking at that market in depth, did a ton of market research, thought we could go back to our old clients that we've had since 1980, thought we could market the product successfully here in Ontario, and that was not true. Again, the reason, in the hydropower world, even though the water moves very quickly, the decisions move very slowly. No one really wanted to take a chance on a new product, even though it wasn't a new product, it was a tried and tested product. But because we put it together in a package and we were marketing it to a different type of hydropower development, nobody really wanted to give us the time of day. So we said, all right, forget you, Ontario, as much as we love you because we live here, we're going to start looking internationally. People said, are you crazy? You have a 4-person company. You don't have very deep pockets at all. How far do you think you're going to come or go internationally? And we said, leave it to us. We're entrepreneurs. We know everything already. We can do it, right? So we literally started networking our way into specific countries. We pick up the phone. I had built a very large network outside of Galt Green in the financial world, and I was lucky enough to meet a ton of different people with different backgrounds who had very established roots in different countries around the world. So what I did was I did it the old-fashioned way. I picked up the phone and I started networking my way through the deep and thick forest of hydropower. I mean, it was really quite an exercise. And what we found was, because we had a product that was environmentally friendly, fully packaged, not complicated, and very cost effective, the developing countries around the world opened the doors to allow us to visit there, look at the opportunities that were available, because there were many, many opportunities around the world that nobody was paying attention to. So we ended up falling into the niche market of irrigation canal and in-conduit applications. We found that these opportunities far exceeded the small, medium, and large hydropower activities, development opportunities around the world, which was great news for us. So we started putting a lot of effort I don't want to say money because we don't have a lot of money, but we put as much money as we had into developing those relationships. And what we did over the course of the last 2 years was establish business relationships with people in groups in South America, specifically Brazil, Colombia, and Chile. We made it to Sri Lanka. We have very, very deep ties in Sri Lanka now, and we're working our way through that process. The Philippines, India, and we really started focusing only on those areas because we had limited resources. So I would say the biggest barrier for us was money was our biggest barrier. As a small company looking at international opportunities, money was definitely the barrier we had because we have a founder who has 40 years of experience in the hydropower world with a groundbreaking technology. So those two things are great, but it's very, very difficult to implement those things and get them into the right hands if you don't have the money to do so.
Thanks, Will. And that's actually a good segue into the next question I was going to ask, which is, and I won't ask you because you've given us the answer for Galt Green Energy,
Perfect.
But for the other two of you, what's been the bigger challenge as your business has grown? Is it getting talent or getting money? Go ahead, Ahmed.
I think if I were to pick between the two, I'd say money's harder. I mean, there's a lot of capital, there's a lot of investors, but it's finding the right investor. Because we were in we're in this water industry, which is this large, complex, $500 billion a year industry that not a lot of people understand or know very well. Because for most people, their interaction with water is when they turn on their tap or drinking water, but there's complex water infrastructures behind the scene that take care of taking water and treating it, distributing it, managing it, cleaning our waste before discharging back to a body of water. And so, for us, it was, took us a lot of effort to find the right investors, but when we did, it was pretty easy conversation. But I'd say and from a talent perspective, I mean, we're constantly getting resumes and down the States, people from MIT, Harvard, because people who are passionate about what we do. So we were getting good, from a talent perspective, but definitely been more effort and harder to raise the capital we need to scale.
Okay.
How much?
Sorry?
How much was that capital used?
I mean, we don't release our public numbers and so on, but what I'd say is close to $1 million is what we've raised so far to get us to where we're at now, and but there's we've got a big market to go out and change and innovate on, and so as a small company, you have fewer resources to get a bigger voice in the industry. So that's always been a bigger challenge.
Thanks, Ahmed. And Michael, people or money?
I'd say it's both, but at different times. So, in a rapidly growing new venture startup, things in your business is changing on a monthly basis, weekly basis, sometimes daily basis, sometimes even down to the hour. Things can change as you get new information in. And so, we've seen periods in time where we're capital constrained. So, it doesn't matter if we have fantastic people without the capital to actually put into buying the equipment and the raw materials and all of the support infrastructure, we can't really do very much. There's times then when, okay, we have the capital, but now we need the expertise in terms of manpower and skills in certain areas, whether it be something technical, operations, sales, marketing, etc. So I mean, I think it's a bit of both. Obviously, if you had tons and tons of money, it's easier to attract kind of top talent, but it's also not just the right talent, it's getting it at the right time. So there was, part of our challenge was when we were first raising money, we knew we were going to scale from 3 people to 12 in a period of probably 2 to 3 months. But having people ready with the right skill set to hire all kind of at once is really difficult, because most good people have an existing job, or if they're looking for a job, they're going to find it right away. So it's a tough balance.
Good. And I think you're right. It is both at different times. If you could think back to 2 or 3 years to as you were starting out in the business, is there one thing, or maybe even 2 things, that you know now that you wish you'd known then? Ahmed?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But I think when we started off, at least me personally, I had this sense of naive optimism of what's possible and what can be done and what resources it would take and how fast it would happen, and which I still believe is a necessary part of entrepreneurship, not the end all be all, but having some sense of that optimism. But the thing that I think that would have maybe made the battle sort of wounds less deep would have been having more experience. But on the flip side, with more experience, then you wouldn't have that fresh perspective and fresh thought process of looking at a problem a different way. So that's what makes it hard to say.
Okay. Michael?
I guess for me, it's the good lesson over the last 2 or 3 years is that everything is a process. It's never just, oh, we want to do this, let's go and do it. There's always, takes time, whether it be from raising capital to sales and marketing to I want to hire this person. It's not just like they're ready and that's it. It's a process, and that process sometimes can be really long. So, there's things that we've done that, I wish 2 or 3 years ago, if we had known this, there's things that we said, oh, this is going to take so long, or it's just going to be easy when we need it, and we didn't invest in doing little bits of work here and there that kind of would have laid the groundwork for 2 or 3 years later that we could have harvested something of major value. That being said, it's also a really tough balancing act, because you say, okay, how much can I invest my very limited time and capital resources today to solve problems or to address something that is potentially going to be valuable 2 years later, or something that's going to be valuable 2 months later, because we don't even know if we're going to be around 2 months from now.
Good. Yeah. Will?
Similar for us. I mean, it's how to use the resources we have. I mean, we started off with, a nice chunk of money in the business, and we were a little naive, even having so many years of experience behind us. A little naive around the process of what it means to make a sale in another country, because over the last, since 1980, we were marketing a different product. We were a startup as of 2012. So as a startup, we have to be a little bit more realistic to the process itself and how we should spend those resources. It wasn't just, we have some money, let's spend it, let's go make some sales. That's what it was. In June of 2012, we were going to go make some sales. Well, that was a very difficult road. And that's what I would look back and say. We understanding the process and really having a concrete plan of how to spend those resources. Because, like Michael said, they go quick. Very, very quick. If I can emphasize quick.
Yes, they do. Okay, so you're all small startups. There's small startups in the room. Mostly startups don't sell to other startups. They want to sell to big companies. How's the situation when you are a small startup and you're having to negotiate, sell to, deal with a large company? It could be as a supplier, that's a key supplier. It could be as a partner, it could be as a customer. Ahmed?
So I mean, most of our customers are those big companies. We think of Dow, Schneider Electric, Siemens, and those types of companies. So it's the difference is that startups are much more agile. We're moving faster, and for these large companies, they don't have that same sense of urgency or need to work as fast. And it's just a matter of working around it. I mean, it's you can't put all your eggs on one companies or one deal. It's making sure that there's enough customers that we're talking to, because if one of them takes longer, then there's other ones that can close. So I think it's just understanding that that's what it takes. I mean, I worked at Microsoft before, so I came from that big company environment, and then joined started a startup. And the timelines are different, but I think it's just a matter of recognizing it and not putting too many of the eggs in one deal or one customer. And the other thing that's interesting is that when the big companies are at a point where they're making a decision, then they'll work you. I mean, they'll say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, and then it just goes crazy. So it's just managing that expectations.
Good. Michael?
So for us, we have a lot of very close partnerships with very large multinational corporations. And the way we always approach it is that businesses are made up of people at the end of the day. And everyone likes to talk about how, big corporations are big and slow and all of this. But at the end of the day, we try to identify who are the key decision makers. And at the end of the day, they're human. They have emotions. And if you can try to build those personal connections, and sometimes that's also a long process. Sometimes, getting through the door at some of these large places, building up that rapport with that one key decision maker, that could be a year-long process. But when push comes to shove and they have to actually put company resources behind making a decision in your favor versus a competitor or some other project, it makes a world of difference when you have that personal connection. And everyone likes to say, well, they're making a decision in the best interest of the company. I've seen time and time again where those little personal connections makes a big enough difference to kind of push something over the line. And I think that's really critical for small companies to be able to do that in order to kind of punch way above their weight and to be able to influence a lot of these massive corporations to want to actually spend their time with you. Because they even though they have lots of money and people, they have limited time as well. And sometimes, often, their biggest concern is, well, are we going to put a lot of resources behind you, and you're going to be gone in 6 months or a year? Why even bother?
Will?
To be honest, we don't work with very large companies. The hydropower world in general, there are some very large players out there, but we haven't attempted to contact them yet. I mean, the largest player I think that we're dealing with at the moment here in Ontario is OPG, because they're a major player. And just like these two gentlemen said, they move at a snail's pace. And it's not because they don't want to do business with you or anything like that, but they want a lot of information from you before they make a decision. So the key to working with anybody, I think, is realizing who is a business partner and who is a client. A lot of times we spend so much time networking and building our business network that we forget that we have to sell. For myself, I'm a huge networker. I love it. If I could only network and do nothing more, that's what I would do. Because there's no pressure with networking. Everybody wants to talk to you and everybody wants to hear about your product. Not everyone wants to buy it. So you have to make that distinction when you're building your business pipeline. And again, business pipeline is relative to the clients that you have and how you can move through the process with whether it's a big corporation or it's a small corporation, or just a group of people who are looking to buy the product. So it's just determining where to put that energy.
Great. We'll just do one or two more questions and then open it up to the floor, because I'm sure lots of you have questions. So we already sort of took off the table two of the biggest needs, which are people and money to get the business going. Are there other types of supports that were really critical to get your business going that you either relied on heavily or you wish had have been there because entrepreneurs could use them a lot to get going?
Okay, resources. Actually, just interesting. I was just thinking about Entrepreneurship 101 and seeing this sign right in front of me, and made me realize that, a few years ago when we started off, I remember being in this exact class in this exact same program and learning about value proposition and business model and what those things are, and so the nice thing was having something like this available, for I can't remember if for free or not, but these types of resources, just learning about what have other entrepreneurs done and what are some frameworks, what are some processes. Because before starting the company, I was just an engineer, had no business background, had no experience in the industry, and so these types of resources were super helpful. I think there's two different ways. So one is through these programs, but the other one is through people. And so surrounding myself with people who've been successful at starting and exiting companies, who can mentor and teach, and we can talk to about some of the challenges and work through some of the problems. So I think those two types of resources, I think, are really helpful, because a lot of times when you're an entrepreneur, you're generally solving a problem that no one's ever solved before, and there's a lot of uncertainty, unknowns, and what helps is having people, resources around that make it a little bit more, a little easier.
Good, thank you. Michael?
So I would second that. It's the people you can surround yourself with, advisors, mentor, people that have been through it before. But I've also found actually that some of the best advice we've gotten is from other people that are in the thick of it themselves. So other entrepreneurs that are in the middle of running their company. And the reason why it's different is that people that have been successful before, often after a period of time, there's a bit of kind of revisionist history, and they kind of forget the kind of, some of the details that really matter and kind of the really bad times and, what to really focus on. And so, I remember when we were raising our first round of external capital, and we got lots of advice from people who have raised, tons of money before, and they all had very good, solid advice. And then I had one meeting at the end with Ted Livingston, who started Kik. So, big success. He's still running it. It's probably going to be a multi-billion-dollar exit. Fingers crossed, hopefully. Looking really good, But he's in the thick of running his business and still raising large sums of venture capital. And he had some key pieces of advice that no one else had mentioned that were really, really poignant about here's the terms to look out for and why they matter. And the difference is because he was in the thick of it, it's things that are at the absolute top of his mind that when he goes into a negotiation with an investor, those are the points that he cares about. It's not the things that he kind of reminisces about that, here's some wisdom based on my 10 years of having done this. It's things that he actually cares about at the moment. And so I found that in different areas, finding other entrepreneurs, it's often helpful if they're, just a little bit further down the track than you are, to be able to go to them and say, how did you get around this problem? What did you do in this situation? And it could be for even very simple things like, what accounting software do you do? How much do you pay people? Very, very basic things that rather than run around and waste a lot of time, someone can give you an answer right away and you can just go and do it. And also because so many things are changing so quickly in the world around us, the way you build a business 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, in certain fields and the tools available and all these kind of resources out there, it's very different. So someone that's in the thick of it now kind of has their finger on the pulse better than kind of dinosaurs that have great wisdom but not necessarily immediately actionable advice.
Thanks.
I would say sit down with your team, if it's a small team, if it's a large team, whatever it may be, figure out who's good at what, and then figure out where those gaps lie. Because as entrepreneurs, yes, as I jokingly said earlier, we know everything, because that's true. But believe it or not, there are some gaps in the business that need to be filled. What I would recommend is when you find those gaps to fill them, but to fill them for free. Right, so that's the key, and also the hardest part. So, I mean, Mars has been great to us. We have a fantastic advisor who may or may not be in the room with us tonight, and we wouldn't have been able to be where we are today if we didn't connect with the advisor. Because, like I said, we had run a successful business, but we didn't run a business as a startup. So as a startup, it's a very different playing field. And I like the word dinosaurs because there are a lot of them in the industry, not always people. All right, so you have to make sure that you can fill those gaps for free and really connect with knowledgeable people around you.
All right, just before we open it up on the floor for free-for-all, is there a last word of advice, encouragement, or thought that you'd want to give to all the entrepreneurs out there about what they should be doing, worrying about, keeping the faith?
You know, to be honest, I'd go back to like the point we made earlier around people, because you know, one of our early investors, John, you know, he gave me this advice, and he said, we were talking about you know, some of the challenges, and one of the things that he said was, Ahmed, you know, you're not the person who's going to make WatrHub successful. Your job is to find people that are going to make WatrHub successful. And it was a pretty humbling way to look at it, but you'll start realizing how, as you know, individuals are very limited in what we can accomplish, and it really is about surrounding ourselves with people. And you know, when I say people, I'm thinking of it broadly. I'm thinking not just employees or people we hire, but you know, bringing the right customers, bringing the right investors, the right advisors, even friends and peers, and because they all have some role in this journey you're in, and whether they share an idea, whether they share a contact, whether you know they're investing, whether they're you know paying for a solution, and so it's really the people that make it worth it, that help you go through those ups and downs, and so I just you know, my advice is just focus on people. It's all about people.
Thank you, Michael.
You know, sitting up here talking on a panel, I think it sometimes can make it look a bit easy. That just like, you know, everything comes together. And, you know, I remember 2-3 years ago sitting in an audience and listening to panels like this and just being like, oh, geez, well, these guys were just really smart, or they're really lucky, or the right time, and all of this. So, I mean, I think it's good to keep in mind that all startups, all new ventures, it is hard. You know, we make it perhaps look easier than it actually is, and it can be really, really horrible at times. And it is an emotional roller coaster, up and down. I mean, you face rejection and failure every single day, again and again and again and again. But it's having that tenacity to keep going and keep fighting for it and not stopping that ends up allowing you to get to a point where you can have some level of success. And I mean, I think for us, and probably anyone can say this, that, you know, we've reached a level of success, but who knows what tomorrow holds. I mean, we could be bankrupt in not that long a time. We could be out of business. We could be, you know, wiped out by a large corporation. We hope to keep going, and we're going to fight as long as we can, but it's still you know, we're just a tiny bit up the mountain. There's still a huge challenge ahead.
Humbling thought.
I think as entrepreneurs, we're salespeople, right? I mean, a lot of the time we're spending our efforts getting people to buy what we have because you need it. It's so good for you, you know. You have to have it, right? We spend so much time and effort doing that. I think some advice to give is reverse that thought process. Don't be a salesperson, but listen to the people that are across the table from you. Because if you go in with open ears and a closed mouth, you're going to learn a lot more about your clients. You're going to learn a lot more about the people who need the product. And you're going to learn so much about the business itself and what it means to be an entrepreneur, and by not forcing your product down someone's throat, it's your job as an entrepreneur, believe it or not, will get a little bit easier. So a little quote that I made up, you know, it's cheesy or whatnot, but if you go in with no expectations, you will always, no matter what, leave with the unexpected. So in every situation, close your mouth and open your ears, if I can give any advice.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, first of all, to the panel, thank you very much for sharing your insights, experiences. We should never, at Mars E101, take that for granted. So thank you very much for sharing your time. The question's actually to Will, and I'm intrigued for the kind of business you're in and the market you're in. If you can comment a little more about the capitalization and the politics of water dealing with developing countries, because you've got some very unique clients with very unique needs. I mean, Sri Lanka was at the receiving end of a tsunami, which of course water purity was an issue, but I'm sure water energy was another. Chile has one of the longest coastlines and yet is very, very narrow. You've got Brazil taming the Amazon. I'm curious if you can share some insights on how you're making money and who the real customers are, because I still didn't get a sense of who your real customer was.
Yeah, fair enough. We've been asked that question many times, and we've been asked it by investors specifically, and it's a difficult question for us to answer. I wish I could say we were making a lot of money. So I can't really tell you that we're making a ton of money. We're actually spending more money than we're making. And I think that's par for the course when it comes to startups. But we've opened up a massive market. In the United States, we're looking at $1 billion worth of opportunity alone. The reason is, like I said earlier, there's not a technology out there that covers all aspects of low-head hydropower development. I mean, there are technologies out there, and a lot of them are still in the development stages of the game. To answer your question then, who is our customer? Well, our customer ranges. It can be a government agency. In developing countries, it's a little difficult to figure out who your actual customer is because there are individual players in those areas that either contribute specifically to development of hydropower or in some respects connect you to someone who's developing hydropower. Government agencies are the ideal groups to work with, but in some of the developing areas, there aren't government agencies that are looking specifically to develop irrigation canals or in conduit applications. However, there are agencies who are interested in green energy. So we can fall under that umbrella. Capitalizing those projects becomes a little bit difficult as well. In Sri Lanka, for example, for the first several projects we're working on, we may be investing in those ourselves through investors. It's really, I have to say, it's sort of a minefield when it comes to figuring out who your actual client is in international markets. And I know that doesn't really give you an answer. But it's a matter of learning the playing field. And for example, in Chile, there are a lot of people who are interested in, and a lot of groups who are interested in developing low-head hydropower for farming applications and so on. But lawyers are very, very involved in the development process because of permitting and approvals. So in Chile, lawyers are your best friend, because they can connect you to the government agencies and help you work your way through the permitting and approval that's needed for hydropower. In Sri Lanka, private players are a big part of hydropower development. In the United States, you have to team up with engineering firms or R&D operations. We work closely with Alden Laboratories, which is one of the largest research and development firms in the US for hydropower products and water and fish friendly, anything that has to do with environmental. And then on the West Coast in California, we've connected very closely with one of the major engineering firms that does about 70% of irrigation and in conduit applications.
Okay, so you all have focused on how you overcome challenges around selling your product. So though products are different on its face from services, I'm just wondering, what are your service and social elements of your products themselves? And how do you sell that aspect of your services? How do you overcome the challenges of selling the service element of your products and combining that with your partnership and sales?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. It's how do we sell services, or?
Well, what we're learning here is that there seems to be a difference between actually being an entrepreneur. Like there's there's like a product, so like there's like technical startups, right? Tech businesses, and then there's social innovation. So I guess my question is coming more from the social innovation aspect of how do you overcome challenges, like all of your things are like environmentally friendly, and these are all green ideas and businesses that you have going on. So there has to be a social innovation part in there. I'm just wondering, how have you coupled that with your products, and how do you get over some of the challenges? Because you talk more about product challenges and not really how you're partnering up and how that might be affecting your sales, and how do you deal with that?
Okay, cool. So yeah, I can start with that. We see ourselves as playing a catalyst role for social innovation in water, because our customers are typically developing these solutions to water challenges and water problems. So they've got the solutions that solve water quality issues, that solve water efficiency issues, and water infrastructure, aging infrastructure issues. So, their solution, their challenge is getting visibility into specific, water problems that they can go in and solve. And so, the traditional model has been, very slow. Their sales channel has been very slow. It's, they'll have to invest to go massive water conferences and hope to meet someone with that water problem, or they'll sell through, individual firms in different regions that focus in their specific jurisdictions and make all these a network of these partnerships. And so that's a very slow way to get a new water solution out to the market, whereas our challenges now are getting much more severe and more urgent. And so what we're doing is we're empowering these companies with these innovative water solutions with the data analytics that they need to go in and say, these are the types of cities with the types of water issues that we should talk now because we can uniquely address. And there's layers and layers of complexity under it in terms of how that happens. But we see our role as playing a catalyst, and our success is the accelerator adoption of these new water solutions. And how we measure it is in water quality and water availability, because if we're successful, we're going to help reduce some of these water quality, water scarcity challenges that we're seeing right now around the world.
Okay, good. Anything to add? No obligation?
I mean, we're a little bit more than just, energy efficient lighting. One of the things that pains me most walking through just, any setting where there's artificial lighting is looking at, in the name of energy efficiency, people putting in bad lighting, like putting in horrible quality LEDs that are over bright, have like a really harsh blue, unnatural glare to them, and saying, oh, we're going to save energy. And it's funny that lighting, there's been lots of innovation from like candlelight all the way up to solid state lighting in terms of efficiency, and everyone does it saying we're going to save energy, and energy consumption per bulb goes down, but total energy consumption from light goes up, because everyone says, hey, let's just have more light because it's cheaper and it can be brighter and it takes less energy, so let's just put more. And I think there's some stat that like 98.5% or something like that of spaces in North America are overlit, meaning you have way too much light. And the problem is that it's not just wasteful, it's harmful for humans. Too much blue light messes up your dopamine cycle, which has huge implications for sleep and circadian rhythm. And it's something that a lot of the manufacturers have kind of built in false advertising and focusing on this number and that metric because they had to sell products. And so part of what we have to do with our, in selling the technology is also re-educating just the general public on, to some extent you've been lied to. And here's, what actually matters and how can we do this better? Not just because we have better technology, but better ways of designing entire lighting systems. I mean, we're sitting up here with blindingly glaring bright lights shining in our face. If you had the division of organic LED is, well, you don't need that. It can be a large sheet of light so that it just looks like you walk outside and it's everything's lit up. And in fact, you can do it with less amount of light. So you have a technology that's not just more efficient, but uses less light, so the double bonus, and healthier, better environment, better space for working.
I think that's two good examples on social structure. I think we'll move it along to
I have
more
a good
questions?
answer, but I'll hold
Oh, all right, go.
Just kidding, go ahead.
He didn't really have an answer at all, I don't think. Go ahead.
Ahmed, I was just wondering, what data do you exactly collect on water, and how do you collect it, and how do you package and sell that data?
Yeah, so we collect data on water, wastewater systems, so water facilities, underground infrastructure, water quality levels, efficiency levels. There's honestly, there's lots of complexity in that, but we're the only place you can go to get that kind of data. And how we collect it, it's public records and government files and government databases. So they're out there. It's just dispersed in many different municipal and federal and state level and provincial level data sources. So we've built intelligent software that can intelligently aggregate all this data and normalize it, clean it, and put it in a way that customers can use.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm the CEO of a company that's going to make 100% compostable plastic. And I say I'm the CEO because, Ahmed, to your point, I live at Young and Wellesley. I never go north of Bloor. I've never seen a manufacturing plant or a field. And it's going to be a starch-based, so it's agrarian-based plastic replacement. I don't know what a farm looks like, and I don't know what a factory looks like. So I have a potato expert on my team. I have a factory expert on my team. I make sure they talk to each other, and I go to lunch. But I have two specific questions for you. One is, I'm personally located in Toronto, but I am finding that funding in the US is extremely prevalent. And I'm speaking specifically of industrial development bonds, which are in some states so generous that it is cheaper to produce in those states than it is to produce in China. So my one question is, have you any experience with that and any advice to give? The second question is, there are a number of large companies who manufacture the manufacturing process I want to use. And I need to understand the trade-offs between OpEx and CapEx, and whether or not, as I start, should I build to spec and lease back, or own?
Okay.
I have a freaking clue. I mean, I go to Halt Redford, so I don't know any of these questions, and I don't know anything about the science of polylactic acid, to your point, Michael, about how stuff is made. That's not my job, though. It's to get these things together. But the money part is my job.
Okay. So your second question, I think, is a bit more complex. I have to better understand it, and it's, so if it's okay.
I'll actually address that.
Okay,
yeah,
so perfect. So I'll work
Perfect,
on
we have a team.
Nice work.
Are you guys advisors available?
And to your point around capital, I mean, and again, I don't know how industrial bonds or development bonds that you talked about work, but to overall as a philosophy, what I've found is that it's about finding believers, not about converting non-believers. So because we burned a lot of time going and chasing investors, and most recently, we raised some capital from an impact fund based in Toronto, and when we explained what we're doing, I mean, they got it right away, and they were like, "Wow, this is going to be big, and you guys are building the GPS of the industry," and so it was such an easier process because they understood what we're trying to build and then understood the vision, and they understood the problems, and it just became a conversation. Now, you could go to a bunch of other investors that maybe aren't investing in these types of things. It's just a harder conversation because if it's not in their investment thesis, if it's not something that they fit in their sweet spot, it's just a harder conversation. And I think there is a lot of capital out there. I think there are a lot of investors out there. I think the challenge is always finding those believers because it's just so much easier. And now to your point around Toronto versus other places, I mean, without knowing the specifics of it, I mean, at some point as entrepreneurs, we just have to be resourceful and find where the customers are, where the investors are, and do what it takes to attract their money.
Michael, do you want to take a shot at OpEx versus
I think I kind of
CapEx?
understand your question. I mean, it's for a small young company. It's cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Nothing else matters.
Okay.
So, if you're going to go out and say, well, I'm going to put a huge investment into capital expenditures to set something up because it's going to get my marginal cost, so much smaller, great. Do that when you start making profit and you have money in the bank to be able to do that. But looking at, how you're going to allocate CapEx versus OpEx versus, variable costs, all of this is really looking at the cash flow. When are you going to have cash in your bank account? When do you get paid? When do you have to put money out? Because there's a lot of fantastic business ideas that go nowhere and sink because the cash flow cycle doesn't make sense. That the more you sell, the more cash you need, and there's no way you can ever make it work. I think Amazon is the best example of a business model where they get paid before they pay any bills by like 2 months or something, or at least originally that was for their cash flow cycle. So the more they sold, the more money they had sitting in their accounts that they could then push back out to invest in growth.
Yeah.
So it's always look at the cash flows, like not the costs and saying, oh, I'm going to put a whole bunch of money down now to save a bunch of money in the future. Well, that cash in your bank account is way more valuable than anything at the early stages.
Then can I just ask a follow-up question? I have tried in several situations and been successful at selling product in advance because of the type of product it is. So people are willing to pay before delivery to guarantee that output.
Great.
But I haven't built anything yet. So how screwed am I?
Well, so that's I think for startups and young ventures, you have to break all the rules and you have to put yourself out there and you have to be willing to go and promise people the world. The flip side is you actually have to be able to deliver it or you fall flat on your face very quickly.
Yeah.
But unless you're going to take that risk and be able to promise people we can do it, if they ask you, can you do it? Sure. Another great example was Bill Gates at Microsoft. They said, hey, you have some operating system ready to go? He said, yeah, absolutely, we have it done. And they got the deal done and then they went, oh shit, how are we going to do it? Let's go figure it out.
Yeah.
And so it's if you have those type of deals, those are the best, but now you just have to actually deliver.
Okay, just two good answers to those two questions that you raised. I will add one more from a dinosaur's point of view on the point you raised about funding is available. It's easier to get in certain places, although easiest to get from those that already believe. Be really cautious about decisions you make around government money that's available. Government money that's short-term that you can take and spend is good. Making a long-term decision to locate somewhere because of favorable government conditions can change in a week with a changing political wind, and suddenly you've made a long-term commitment. So just be really careful of part of your business model being based on a government policy.
There's also often a lot of strings attached to government money that
seats on the board, and you've got to do business.
Things that you don't see until you're already at the end of, okay, let's just sign the contract now, and you're like, whoa, where did all these things come from?
Your first hit of crack is free. The second one is not. Go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about the personal connections you were talking about, especially the gentleman in the middle, but I'd love to hear from all of you. You were talking about connecting with people on a personal level, even taking a year to do this. I was hoping to hear some specific advice on this or examples that you have.
So it's, sometimes it's, there's business relationships that we started 4 years ago. And we didn't know it was going to lead to anything today, but it's just we did it. Sometimes it's just spending time with people. So often when we go to meetings or we'll go to visit a partner site, we always make sure to schedule in a lunch, a dinner, some time to just, after you do the business, to just sit and talk with people and get to know them on a personal level, and you kind of chat and you joke and you learn about each other's families. And you find that the next meeting you go into with those people, as long as you've actually presented yourself well and they like you at those dinners, it goes a really long way. And so there's been cases where, I remember times we've flown to New Jersey for a half-an-hour lunch with someone and then flown right back. And that was a meeting that we could have done on the phone. could have done on the phone. We actually could have probably done it in an email, but going there in person allowed us to close a very large deal 3 months later. Or, our perception is that had a big influence.
Was there ever anything that preceded the business talk? Like you'd set up a relationship before that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's times our COO, so Chief Operating Officer, is 63. He's a, dinosaur, you could say. He was part of the management team at IBM that started Celestica here in Toronto. It has major experience in manufacturing and electronics, and we hired him after a relationship that lasted 7 months. And the first time I met him was I was on some sort of panel like this or something up on stage talking about something, and he was in the audience, and we met afterwards and chatted, and that led to a discussion over coffee 2 months later, which led to a phone call a month after that, which led to some consulting work he did for us on the side, that then led to us bringing him on about 1.5 years ago. So, it's a process. And it's the more you can get people to like you and buy into what you're doing, the more they're willing to put your neck out. They're willing to put their neck out to kind of help you. And that's really critical in a lot of business settings where, why should a manager who's making a purchasing decision stick their neck out for you unless they actually have some, personal vested interest in terms of just liking you and, yeah.
Quickly, remember, as entrepreneurs, you never get to turn off.
Yep.
You don't always have to be selling your product, but you can never stop talking about what you're doing. You can't ever stop listening to what other people are doing, because once you do that, stop being an entrepreneur. Right? Just get out of the business and do something else. Because your job as an entrepreneur is to promote yourself, promote your business, build that network, talk to the people who may not, 7, 8, 9, 10 months down the road, they'll come back around. People will automatically show up. People that you didn't expect to show up will automatically show up. And it's because you took the time to get to know them. You spent time learning about what they're doing. Those are the most important parts of being an entrepreneur, I think.
Yeah, and I wanted to echo both things. On two settings, on the customer front and on the investor front, because I think personal relationships, and it's all about about people. We're in a position where we're a small unknown company when we started off, and we're going to these big companies in the industry, and we're basically offering them a totally different way of doing things that's going to require a lot of changes in the organization, and that's risk, right? That's someone taking a bet on that we're going to deliver, because like the comment here, we promised stuff before it's ready, and now you got to go make it happen, and so especially in the early days, it's why would they take a bet on you? And it's put up the product and the solution is one part of it, but the other part of it is you as an entrepreneur, like just them believing in the mission, them believing in what the company stands for. And I think those are things that people get behind when you are in those situations, when you're working with signing up these large customers. On the investor front, I could share a story. When we started off for our first round of capital, we went in, we talked to all these investors and their offices and so on, and we would get grilled, and we didn't know what we were doing at the time either. But then we got advice, why don't you just start taking them out for dinner instead of meeting them at their offices? And so those same investors, when we took them out for dinner, were like, oh yeah, we love what you guys are doing. It's a big mission. And there's something to do with, the context of the situation where you're in, which does make an impact. There's some conversations are easier when you're at a much more informal, casual situation. There's one restaurant on John and King where, out of a sample set of 20 investors, everyone that we took to that restaurant closed, and everyone we didn't close. So that was my lucky restaurant, and so, and it's 100%, and now it's shut down, so I got to find a new one. But
I was gonna say you might find me there one day.
It's an interesting thought with investors, because I was talking to one today, and he said, you know, great ideas can still lose a lot of money. And he said, I invest in the people.
Absolutely.
And you don't always know which ones are going to turn out to be those, but you've got to keep the networking going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was called Dazzling Room. It was this Asian fusion restaurant on John and King. And yeah, now it's something else. So I'm in search
for
of
a new place to get lucky.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Hello, panel. Thanks for the talk. I'm Andrew Duno. So I started my own company, but then I've gotten a few crew of people who got on board with no financing because of the way I talk to them. So I was wondering for mentorship, because I'm still new to it, for mentorship and financing, as in not putting your eggs in all the basket, where can I go for financing, as in finding investors, finding ways to investors to know that, I'm not only focused on them for money, but I have other branches where I can focus in, because I feel like when you have that, it gives investors a sense that you're actually going to other sources to, get financing, but I don't know where to go for those, so I was just wondering how I could do that so they can know, and where to find the investors.
So in the early days when we're going after individual angel investors, there's a saying, ask for money, you get advice, and ask for advice, you get money twice. And we found that to be pretty true, where there's some people that we were like, hey, you've built and exited this company, and we want to talk to you about these 4 things. And those conversations turn to investors, versus some investor we went to, hey, we want to raise this much money from you, and a lot of times those didn't work out. So that I think held more true in the early days when it was an idea. It was more about investing in the person. Now in terms of where to go, I think it's going to vary based on what your product is, what your company is, what your market is. But when it's not fully developed, you're generally looking for people that can see the vision. And then over time, you get, what I've at least found is that we just get more articulate about what the vision is, and then we're able to attract more investors. But yeah, I mean, that's one approach to go about it.
I think you have to learn how to use the network you have. It's one thing of building a large network, but the most important part of building a large network is learning how to mine the network. So what you really need to do is spend some time looking at the people who are in your network, and how you'll be able to utilize them to get you to the next level. Because it's very difficult just to go out and, like Ahmed said, find the money. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. And it goes hand in hand with the fact that you're always out there looking for someone to talk to. Mine your network, use your LinkedIn. I always used to joke about, I'm not smart enough for LinkedIn, I don't really understand how it works. Well, when you open a business, you learn very quickly how to use LinkedIn, because it's one free resource that you have, and it's a way to build your network and really find out who in that network can direct you to the venture capitals or the investment companies and people.
Hi, my name is Jose. So I have 2 startups right now, and I'm looking into more like, my question is basically on accelerators and versus finding your own capital and working on your own. So I find, for example, I'm looking into the Lorry Launchpad or the DMZ or maybe even Mars. But my question is basically, some accelerators ask for a percentage, and I don't know which accelerators are better to go into. So what would you take on just looking for investors and going on your own as a startup, or focusing and putting your time in accelerators?
Easy. Go with the accelerators that don't cost you anything. Frankly, I mean, from my experience. You need resources, you need people, you need experience, you need advice, you need all of these things. You already have something, but you can't take this something and put it somewhere else unless you surround yourself with the people who have already done it, or the resources here. I mean, Mars is a perfect example. We're a 34-year-old company who didn't need any resources at all until we came to Mars and realized that we needed a hell of a lot. So definitely use an accelerator. But I caution entrepreneurs on spending money hand over fist to get to the next level. Take advantage of those free resources. That's why they're there. Let the government pay for these things. It's very important as an entrepreneur to spend your money wisely. So if you don't have to give up a portion of the business, if you don't have to give up a portion of your resources or the percentage of sales or whatever, don't do that.
I think it's like anything. It's cost-benefit analysis. It depends on your specific situation, the specific accelerator or incubator. It's important to look at their track record. So, if you were getting into Y Combinator, I would say, well, the exposure that gives for most companies, it's worth giving away the equity. But, some no-name accelerator that just started up with no proven track record, no proven network, well, is it worth giving away 5 or 10% of your company for? Maybe not. We went through the Creative Destruction Lab at Rotman. It's an accelerator. They don't take equity. It's one of the things they wanted to do differently because they thought that would be a deterrent to getting off the ground. I can say we wouldn't be where we are today without having gone through that program, or we would look very different. But it's a really personal choice, and it just really depends on your situation, I think.
Yeah, so I'd say, if you think about, and I'll talk about our accelerator experience as well, but what you're getting out of accelerators, you're going to get learn, introductions to investors, introductions to customers, and meeting with like-minded peers that you can learn from as well. Now, I think off the bat, starting off with something like Mars, because it doesn't cost you anything, you're going to get connected to advisors, and you're going to be able to kind of develop the business a little bit more. In our case, we went down to Houston for an accelerator. It was a Techstar affiliated in accelerator called Surge, and their focus was on capital-efficient, software-based ideas in industrial industries like oil and gas, energy, water, etc. So it's a really good fit because they just had a lot of expertise and knowledge around what we're doing. So that's why it made sense. And so we went down to Houston, spent a few months there, and we're still, what we got out of it was that it was like getting a mini MBA in a room of 12 really smart companies. Four of them were from Europe. And so we learned a lot from each other. Like every day, we just go to the office and be like, hey, how do you turn on this thing? Or how do you make this, what do you use for CRM? Or how do you guys do your email campaigns? Or how do you guys do meetings? And, all kinds of very tactical, basic things that, you'd be just surprised at how much you can learn from other people. So I think, that's how I would phase it out. Like the comment here, start off by not giving up anything and getting it for free. And then as you get a better idea of what you need, then what kind of accelerators make sense.
I think I can just, the piece of advice I think best that I've heard on, how do you value giving out or giving away pieces of your business? It's, if you're going to give away 10% of your company to do something to someone, but they're going to be able to make the company as a whole worth so much more that as a whole, that like 10%, it doesn't, then it's worth doing it because it's helping you grow and accelerate your process. I mean, that's where the name comes from. I mean, at Google, there was a professor that helped, that was an early advisor that I think they gave 5% of early equity to, which is massive when you look at what Google's valued at today. And he helped them come up with the concept for doing automatic bidding on keyword searches for advertising. That's the whole foundation of their company, right? That's their whole business model and the way they monetize search. So without that insight, the company wouldn't be where it was today. So giving away 5%, it was probably a steal of a deal based on where they are today.
Okay.
Well, first, thank you. That was some great insight. I'm literally getting goosebumps with some of the advice. I'm going to base the question on the context of my business, not just as a shameless plug, but just to kind of word it properly, and then you can answer it in a general way. So a problem that I have right now is I have a green commercial cleaning company, and I charge a little more than other cleaning companies because we're not using bleach, we're using natural products which cost more, hence I charge more for my service. Now I go to a medium-sized company, whether it be 5 or 15,000 square feet, and I can go with the facts that studies prove you have 16% more productivity rate by using green products. At the end of the day, even though they may have better productivity, my service costs more. How do you sell something when your product costs more than the competition, even though you have something better?
I can answer that quickly. It takes me back to what I said earlier. You have to listen to what the need is. Whether your product is more expensive or less expensive is not necessarily the most important part of the transaction. If you're trying to sell a product to a company that could never afford your service no matter what, you can push until the end of time, and whether your product's the cheapest or the most expensive, you're never going to sell it. What you need to do is change the way, not you, in general, change the way you approach those clients. Listen to them more than you talk. It's going to open up a totally different aspect of your business. It's very, very difficult. I've trained many salespeople across Canada for over the course of my 14 years in business development. And the big mistake all new businesses, all salespeople make is the fact that they talk way too much.
I think I was going to say something along those lines is what do they actually care about? The studies that you might be presenting, do they actually, at the end of the day care about it, or is it more about a story of, what kinds of effects can happen as a consequence of not using, these better, more environmentally friendly products? Just as an example or idea, but what would resonate with as you think about the customers, and how would you break down the different customer personas and different customer types and see which actual market has the need that best connects with your solution? That would be, I think, a good thought process. Maybe some new ideas come out of it.
Go ahead, Mike. In lighting, right? Energy efficient lighting. It's nice to think that people bought energy efficient light bulbs because they were energy efficient. But in most cases, that wasn't why. It was, at the end of the day, people, it's hard to sell a $5, $10, $20, $50 light bulb versus the 25-cent incandescent and saying, okay, I'm going to save this. But when the perspective was, well, if cost is money saving is the most important factor to the customer, then it was repackaging as, well, let's look at the total cost of ownership. So, there's certain applications where, high bay lighting like this, how much are you spending for the guy to get on the ladder to go up there and change that light bulb every 3 months or every 6 months? So if you put in our $50 light bulb, yeah, it's going to cost you more up front, but you're not going to have that guy going up on that 30-foot ladder and then the insurance associated with that. So, maybe in your case, it's okay. We're not using bleach and these synthetic chemicals that maybe now your maintenance cost is less over the longer term. We're not going to damage the floors or the surfaces. And that therefore, if you look at the whole picture, there could actually be total cost savings, even though your upfront material cost is in fact higher.
The customer will often want to focus the conversation on what's the cost, and you're stuck defending this costs you more, but, and instead what you want to be telling them is this is going to make you more money because, and be really credible in delivering that message. But if you always let them take control of that, then it becomes a Walmart price war, I think.
It's a fairly general question. How did the strategy of patents in your company affect you in the company, and at what stage? And was it a challenge? And is it still a challenge? And for instance, you're selling internationally. Are you filing in those countries patents? That's all.
Patents are important in our business, very important, because our product's not complicated, and it never has been a real complicated product, so we have to be very, very careful moving into certain countries because it can be manufactured very, very easily. So patents are very important. We have patents, and we've kept to date up to date with our patents. We know that venture capitals and people who are investing in your company like patents as well because it protects the product. So are we getting patents in those specific areas? Yes, we're looking into it, yeah.
So, I mean, we started with patents, but I mean, it's something to be really careful of. There's areas where, if there's something based on years of technical innovation, even though the end product may be incredibly simple, incredibly easy to manufacture, it's based on lots of experience, a lot of research and development, then it's often worth protecting. At the same time, it's a black hole, right? And it's an inverse funnel. You spend $100 today to file your US provisional, that's going to cost you 40, 50, 60, 100,000, 150,000 over the lifetime of the patent, even more, depending on how many countries you want to take it into. And you don't just have one, you end up having many and a whole family and a collection, and so that just becomes a big sink of cash. So, I mean, I think it's a fine balance. I mean, I see a lot of young startups that, we came up with this widget, and now we're going to start looking for something innovative about it and start patenting it. And it's kind of silly in a sense because there isn't actually, the innovation there is not anything really technical. It's putting something together and figuring out how to sell it, and you're probably better off in just marketing and selling it really well and building a strong brand than trying to protect your widget with patents. So, I mean, there's examples on both sides. I mean, ATI, I remember Lee telling us when they started, they had no patents, 0. And they were developing their own chipsets and all of this technology. The only time they started filing patents was when big companies started coming to them and got really interested in what they were doing. And they went, ooh, we better get some paper behind us or we're going to get crushed really quickly.
Ahmed, Michael, and Will, thank you so much for sharing that advice with us today, and David for facilitating an excellent discussion.